Welcome to the New Medieval Ledger. I'm Samuel Dempsey. Today, I want to dive straight into the conversation. I spoke with Rasmus Jarlov, who is the chairman of the Danish Parliament's Defense Committee and a member of the Conservative People's Party. As Defense Committee chair, he's been one of Denmark's most prominent voices against the threat of U.S. military aggression in Greenland. That is what we discussed in this conversation. Unfortunately, it is a real one we must have, and one that he addresses the stakes very clearly for what this means for not only Greenland and Denmark, but for the transatlantic security architecture that has kept us safe for nearly a century. With that, here's my conversation with Mr. Jarlov. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot.
So I want to first start and talk about these negotiations that took place this Wednesday with Danish Foreign Minister Rasmussen, Vice President Vance, and Secretary Rubio. Takeaways of this is, at best, it's a constructive attempt. At worst, it's a complete failure. The meeting ended with Rasmussen saying that clear that they did not manage to change the American position and that it remains that Trump wishes to conquer Greenland. Trump then put out the statement that anything less than U.S. control of Greenland is, quote, unacceptable. What are your reactions to Trump's unwavering desire to take Greenland and the takeaway of these negotiations at large?
It is quite obvious that Trump wants to own Greenland. He says that very clearly. It's also very clear that we can't agree to that. We don't sell people that don't want to be sold and want to remain with Denmark. They're Danish citizens. It's an integrated part of our country. It's like a U.S. state. It would be like selling Hawaii to China or something like that. We can't agree to that. There's no way. And therefore, we're trying to find other ways. What can we do for the Americans in Greenland that they don't already have? And therefore, it was agreed to make this working group that will try to discuss these things. And I think that's constructive. We didn't expect that we'd walk into a meeting and then Trump would tweet out that, okay, I'm convinced I don't need Greenland. So it was pretty much what we hoped for, that we would have some constructive dialogue instead of just continuing to say, we want Greenland, and we say, we're not going to give it to you, because that's not going to get us anywhere, and it's just going to escalate the situation.
So to talk about kind of the end goal, the desired state of the solution to these negotiations, where things should go, I kind of want to real quick set the framework for which Trump's ambitions derive from. So, first there's two ideological groups behind Trump. You have the first, which is the national security neocons, who want Greenland for critical minerals, build this done road doctrine, control the Western Hemisphere. And then you have the second group, which is these tech oligarchs who underpin Trump and the administration's economic position right now, and have outright expressed that they want Greenland for unregulated freedom cities and to conduct terraforming and tech experiments. This is best demonstrated, of course, by PayPal founders Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, but most relevant in this situation is Ken Howery, a co-founder of PayPal, who, as you know, is the now ambassador to Denmark. And then there's Trump himself, who explicitly invoked Manifest Destiny in his inauguration speech, promising to, quote, expand our territory. Specific to Greenland, Trump has framed it in both real estate terms, saying, why don't we have that? Look at the size of this. It's massive, and that it should be part of the United States. Continuing, it's not different from a real estate deal. It's just a little bit bigger. But he's also framed it similar to Mob Boss, saying if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. So all that said, this negotiation ended with this working group. Do you think those entering this negotiation, aiming for this working group, recognize the sincerity to which this administration is putting forward its desire for it?
I can't know, and we don't know the exact motivation behind wanting Greenland. The problem we have is actually exactly that. We're trying to find out, why would you want Greenland? Because the United States already has access to everything it could possibly want up there. They have full military access. They can put as many troops and bases up there that they want. If they want to do mining, they're more than welcome. The Greenlanders have been looking for international investors for decades without really finding any, because it's actually very expensive to extract minerals. It's not something that's going to make you super rich, because all the minerals found in Greenland are also found in other places of the world. The only difference is that it's more expensive to extract them in Greenland because of the extreme Arctic condition and an almost complete lack of infrastructure. So there hasn't yet been any profitable mining projects in Greenland. And thinking that that's going to make you rich is just not true. You could want the minerals for strategic reasons. If you're afraid that supply chains from other parts of the world would break down and you want to be sure that you can still get minerals out of the ground somewhere, then of course you could want to have access to the minerals in Greenland. And we're not going to object to that. I mean, Americans are more than welcome to do that. Be great for Greenlanders as well. So we're really struggling to find logical reasons for wanting Greenland. Today, Americans have access free of charge. If they were to annex Greenland, they would have a hostile population that would never recognize that they own the island and would be enemies. What are you going to do with those people? And you'd have all the expenses of running the Greenlandic society that Denmark basically pays for today. So it's a terrible business case annexing Greenland. And that's without taking into account the complete breakdown of the Western alliance that would follow and all the costs of that would just be enormous. So America would be a lot less safe and it would lose money if it got Greenland, even if we handed it over for free and on friendly terms, which we're never going to do.
As I kind of overviewed a little bit there's a lot of different factors behind this. And at the center of it is that it is irrational. This is not a rational administration moving forward. With that in mind, how legitimate can you take the word of Trump and his advisors and his team in these negotiations? Because obviously the context here is that, just a few weeks ago, there were negotiations between the administration and Maduro, and they had off-ramps. They had, various pathways on the table, but in the end, it didn't mean much for Maduro himself. So how do you approach these negotiations with that in mind? And is hard power not really what speaks to this administration?
Well, it's difficult to know how seriously we should take the threats. I hear a lot of Americans saying we should just laugh it off because it's just Trump, we shouldn't take it seriously. We can't afford that. It's a serious risk when a big power is threatening your country with military invasion. And they've been asked so many times by now whether that's an option or not, and they keep insisting that it is. And when we heard Trump recently say that he would take Greenland either the easy way or the hard way, that also sounded like a threat of a military. So
yes,
we can't just laugh it off and say that's not going to happen. We have to be prepared for that scenario as well. And we don't take it lightly because this would mean that our soldiers would have to fight the Americans and many of them would die. I would have to go to funerals. I would have to look at the parents who lost their sons who've been gunned down by Americans for no reason. So it's no joke. It's not something you should just say if you don't mean it. And it is very, very serious. And we have to be prepared for the scenario, even though, God forbid, it will ever happen.
So I completely agree. It's not something to laugh off, and thinking about how to be prepared for this and also how to be prepared to have to deter the possibility of this. Right now, we have European countries that have sent some forces to Greenland for joint training exercises, which is, an unspoken attempt to basically deter the U.S. from doing this, but it's largely symbolic. The exact numbers aren't clear of, this actual, the amount of forces that have been sent, but it seems like it's dozens of troops made up of Germany, Finland, Norway, Sweden, France, the Netherlands, and the UK. So what do you say to analysts that believe that this attempt falls flat, and that only a brigade size or bigger European force would actually deter U.S. annexation, and one that signals that, for the U.S., blood would actually have to spill to embark on this conquest?
We're very, very grateful for the countries that are sending troops to Greenland, and there will be more coming up there in the coming weeks and months. It's been relatively small numbers to begin with, but those are just advanced parties that are sort of paving the way for larger numbers that could come up there. And I'm not going to tell you that we have a number for how many troops who went up there and exactly what the defense plan is. Even if I had the details of that, I wouldn't reveal that for obvious reasons. But we're grateful for the support. It shows that we're serious. We are going to defend Greenland against any threats that's up there. Americans are telling the world that there's a large threat from China and Russia currently. We don't recognize that at all. We haven't seen a Chinese warship in Greenlandic waters for 10 years, literally. So the story that there's Chinese warships all over the place is simply not true. But we listen to the Americans. They say that we need to have stronger defense up there. So we're moving in troops, and we hope that's taken down in a positive way. But of course, it does also mean that there's more people up there that you have to shoot if you want to invade the island. God forbid it.
Yeah. So, obviously the way things look at the front-facing, aspect of things is a lot different than the conversations that are happening amongst decision makers right now. And, I think to those that are watching this, they're seeing conflicting statements. You're seeing EU Defense Chief Kubilius saying any military takeover would be the end of NATO. And then you see NATO Sec Gen Mark Rutte, who says that NATO is not at all in crisis. So how do you explain these diverging positions? Is this reflective of how European leaders overall are feeling about this? Is there really not a consensus of what to do move forward? And is Europe up to the task to come together to actually deter this possible conflict?
Well, of course, Denmark is the ones that's most concerned about this. It's us that's being threatened. So for us, for sure, NATO would be over. There's no question of that. We can't be in an alliance with someone that attacks us. So obviously, a military threat is the immediate end of our engagement in NATO. I don't think there's any question of that. And we would have to turn completely away from the Americans. Definitely not what we want. Very close and very good allies. In the 250 years of American history, we've never had any hostility with the Americans. We've never been on different sides during a war, always been together. We've been very, very close allies in NATO for the past almost 80 years. And it served us well. We've been very pleased with the cooperation with the Americans. I think we've been so loyal to the Americans. You would turn on yourselves before we would turn on you, probably. The United States was attacked on September 11th, 2001. We took that personal. It was like an attack on us. And we went to fight in Afghanistan. 43 of our soldiers were killed. Hundreds are wounded. There's veterans in Denmark that's limping around without legs today because of that fight for the United States. So now experiencing that we are being threatened with military attack and a very determined campaign to dismantle our kingdom, basically, regardless of whether that's military or other means, is like being stabbed in the back. It's betrayal, and it's not something we would be able to come back from. It's not something that we will forgive or forget. So this would have permanent consequences for our relationship with the Americans. We would orientate primarily towards Europe, away from the United States. And there would be nothing stopping us also from cooperating with others that don't pose a threat to us. And it would be, at least for us, a complete meltdown of the Western alliance with the Americans. I can't say how seriously other European allies will take it, but I do sense a feeling that for most Europeans, this is just a step too far. I mean, we've heard a lot from Trump, a lot of criticism. We heard recently that now it's the official policy of the Americans to support populist movements that want to dismantle the European Union. That's pretty hostile. We had a trade war just a year ago where there's now tariffs on all products coming from Europe, completely out of proportion. And we have not done much about that because the Americans are stronger than us. We know that. But starting to take our land and our people, I think that's a step too far for the European public, to be honest.
And so I do want to get to that great stake and close with that deterrence question. But first, if this blows over, if this doesn't happen somehow, this is truly talk, this is something to be laughed off, is there still room for the conventional transatlantic security architecture to exist? Will Denmark still view the U.S. as the same ally that Denmark did just a year ago?
We will not view the Americans in the same way as we did a year and a half ago, before all this attempts of taking our territory for absolutely no legitimate reason. But if it blew over now, and it was just the words that have been said, and there wasn't any concrete action to actually annex Greenland, would still work with the Americans. And I think, it'll take some time to heal the anger that has been caused by what has been said so far. But I'm sure we could get back to a good relationship, and it would not have lasting consequences. So it's not too late to save the relationship, but it is doing a lot of damage at the moment. And you can read the polls about what people think about the United States at the moment. It's not good. But I don't think it's a lasting damage that has been done yet. Annexing Greenland would do very permanent damage.
And so speaking about these bad polls and public opinion, overall support of the population in Denmark behind the country, behind Greenland as well, there are viral videos right now circulating of American reporters in Denmark interviewing young people about Greenland, where the answers that they're given are that this is an imperial project by Trump, yes, but that so too is Danish interest in Greenland, imperial. So two-part question, how do you answer to those people that say that? And then second, how do you assess the will of the Danish public to defend Greenland if American aggression comes, or just in the prospect of trying to deter American aggression?
We will absolutely defend Greenland. There's no question of that. That would be dishonorable not to do that, just to leave the Greenlanders alone. They're Danish citizens. They're part of our country. So we will absolutely defend it. There's absolutely no question. And there will be no hesitation or wavering about that. It's not difficult to find Greenlanders that will say something bad about Denmark. That's for sure. You have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt. It's like going to Scotland and interviewing people about what they think about England, and they're going to say a lot of rubbish as well. So when push comes to shove, the Greenlanders want to be part of Denmark much rather than being part of the United States. That's for sure. Polls are very, very solid about that. The government is extremely clear about that as well. So that is their preferred choice. They do have this dream of independence, and they do have complaints about the past for sure. And many of those complaints are reasonable and correct. And we agree that there has been some things happening in Greenland shouldn't have happened. In the big picture, however, you have to understand Greenlanders are part of Denmark because they want to. They've had the option of leaving for 17 years. They have never requested independence. They became part of Denmark through a unanimous decision in their own parliament. It's not something we did to them, something they wanted and something they still want. They're working to get more self-determination. There's a lot of things that Denmark still does in Greenland. It's difficult with their huge geography and a very small population to do everything yourself. So Denmark still takes care of everything from, currency, embassies, courts, writing laws, not determining what's in them, but actually writing them. Prisons, a lot of the education is done in Denmark. Healthcare, if you get cancer, you'll be flown to Copenhagen for treatment because they don't have specialized doctors up there. Monitoring airspace and waters and rescue services and many, many other things are still done by Denmark. Gradually, they're trying to take more and more responsibility to take over some of those tasks, but they're not there yet. And they're not requesting independence, and they haven't started a process that will lead to independence. So you shouldn't think that it's something they want to happen tomorrow or next year because it's quite far out in the future.
Yeah, and I imagine now, with the prospect of American aggression, those independent aspirations fall to the wayside at the moment. But Mr. Jarlov, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks a lot. Nice talking to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share. As always, if you have comments, questions, or concerns, here's my email, analysis@samuel-dempsey.com. With that, I look forward to seeing you at our next episode.